I'd like to say thank you to the Piramal Art Foundation for inviting me to talk about the JNAF. And today I thought I'd talk about who we are, what we do, and how we connect to our audiences. Because we are located in the museum, as you can see, which is not a modern art museum. It's a museum that has it's a multi-purpose museum, so it has everything from natural history to miniatures to the Indus Valley civilization. So we have to be aware that the people who walk in through our doors are not only interested in modern art. So that's us, that's the atrium that leads up to our gallery. And since we are located in the museum, we do need to be sensitive to the mandates and the objectives of the museum, especially in relation to its audiences. Because who is the audience of the museum? I mean, it's the public at large. They're from a whole range of backgrounds, different religious, ethnic backgrounds, different communities. They're both international and national visitors. So that's quite a challenge for us. So how did this marriage come about? Well, it happened because of this one man, Jehangir Nicholson, who was originally a cotton merchant actually. He had two early passions, which were car racing and photography. But unfortunately for him, in 1968, his wife died and he was extremely lonely and depressed after that. And one day he walked into the art gallery of the Taj Hotel. And there he saw this painting, a painting by Sharad Bekul, and sort of liked it, bought it for about 150 or 200 rupees and took it back home. And what began as a casual interest developed into a passion and then an obsession, because for the first 2 to 3 decades of his collecting, he bought about 300 paintings, and then he sort of decided that he wanted this to be part of a museum collection. And so the last 10 years during the 90s, it was a fevered kind of buying, but he bought over 500 works. So the collection is about 800 works, but I would really say it's a little jewel of a collection. Because it's one of the best collections private collections of modern Indian art. And he, like all philanthropists, did want to share his collection with the public. So lots of people used to visit him at home to look at the pictures at home and whatever, but he never lived to realize his dream of this whole thing coming into a museum. And so when he died, the trustees of his estate entered into an agreement with the museum where the collection is on loan for 15 years. And I think the strength of this collection is that, well, as I said, it's a little jewel of a collection. It's not large, but it has all the modernists, and it focuses especially on the progressives. And the strength of the collection is that it traces the growth of all these artists through the various phases of their development. So if you see the Tayyabs here, you can see Tayyab Mehta's early falling figure with the heavy brush, the thick brush strokes, the heavy impasto. And then you see his iconic style that developed later, the diagonal with the flat planes of color and the fractured image. So that really is the strength of this collection. And we opened in 2011, and I think this is one of really the best examples of private-public collaboration. Because for us, we got a space to share our collection with the public. And so we could concentrate, the corpus could focus on exhibitions, on outreach programs, on conservation, instead of having to build a building. And the museum got a modern art wing and a whole new audience which had never stepped through the doors of the museum before this. That's our visual storage, where actually we have the paintings hung on vertical racks which slide backwards and forwards, so you can access the collection easily, both in terms of conservation and in looking at the collection. And we have a series of rotating exhibitions which change every 4 to 6 months, so that the public can see the depth and scope of the collection. And also it keeps gallery interest in the gallery alive. They keep coming back to the gallery. And we do try to do museum-level exhibitions. We present a set of thought or ideas which are well-researched and then placed in a certain context. So that was our first exhibition, celebrating the Bombay artists, and it really showcased some of the best works in the collection. We followed that with voicing a presence which highlighted the women artists in the collection, and we had quite a few of them because Nicholson was a huge patron of women artists. We had over 60 in the collection. And there was another reason for this exhibition, because when I discovered that the JJ School of Art, in its curriculum for graduates, had this analysis of the seminal work of several artists, but none of them were women, except for a token Amrita Shergill. So this exhibition sought to sort of highlight the struggle that women had gone through during the 50s and 60s. They were on the fringes of the art movement, and it was only during the 70s and 80s that they began to make their presence felt. And Nicholson also began collecting during that time. And so the two histories sort of intersected. Nothing is Absolute was really an exploration of the journey of abstraction in India, but it was curated by, but it was seen through the eyes of an abstract artist as well as a cultural theorist, Meli Gobai and Ranjit Hoskote. So you had this wonderfully layered show, which also presented you with a very balanced point of view because it gave you two different perspectives. And we also tried to draw objects from various sources which had inspired abstract artists all over the country. So we had Islamic tiles from the museum, we had yantras from a private collection, we had, I think you can see the documentation of shrines by Vidya Kamath, everyday objects from Meli Gobai's collection. And the aim was really to try and help people to connect with an art movement that many of them found inaccessible, and to help them understand that visual art has a language all its own. It may not be the one that we speak, but it's worth trying to connect with it. Taking the line for a walk, as you can imagine, was inspired by the Paul Klee line. The line is a dot that went for a walk. And it attempted to turn the spotlight on the art practice of drawing, which had been overshadowed, we felt, first of course by painting, and then of course by newer art practices like video art, installation, performance art. And we also tried to do a timeline through catalogs of the various drawing exhibitions that had been held in the city. And we also did sketchbooks of artists, which we highlighted in this show. Kekoo, Kali and Jehangir. This exhibition actually presented, I think, a slice of Mumbai's art history, because it celebrated the role that was played by three pioneers whom we felt had helped to grow the art movement in Mumbai. Kekoo Gandhi, Kali Pandol, and both of them had started the first two commercial galleries in Mumbai in 1963, and it was 50 years of their galleries, and the following year was Jehangir Nicholson's centenary. So we felt it was really the perfect time to highlight the role that three of them had played. And this exhibition also focused on the relationship of trust and friendship that had existed between gallerists and collectors, and the wonderful collections that grew as a result, whether it was intentional or unintentional. But collaborations also are a very important part of our work, because it just helps us to get our collection to reach a wider audience. And it also helps us to present, to give an opportunity to people here who may never have a chance to see either certain exhibitions or certain artists. And the first collaboration we had was the artist MOHAN with his estate in New York, and we had one work in the collection which you can see there, and the rest of the work, which is a whole range of, was provided by them. And this exhibition was really an attempt to reacquaint audiences here with an artist who we felt had played an important part in the history of the art development in our country, but he'd just fallen off the art map. Mohan Samant was kind of experimenting with all sorts of avant-garde possibilities that his contemporaries only explored more fully in the 80s and 90s. And in fact, Ranjit Hoskote describes him as the missing link in the evolutionary narrative of contemporary art in India. Well, the first institutional collaboration we did was with Tate, when we brought down the work of Howard Hodgkin, who has very close links with India. He's traveled from India right from the 60s, and he comes to Mumbai and spends 3 months every year here. And when I was doing this fellowship at Tate in 2014, they had an exhibition of Howard where they had just discovered a whole cache of 30 paintings which his printer found when he was clearing out his studio. These were prints that Howard had painted on and were just put into a trunk and forgotten about. So they had just come on show there, and we got some of those works down, and Tate contributed some as well. We had some of their collection, and Howard did a whole series of new paintings as well. And so it was quite a nice range that we had for that show. Well, we've also collaborated with the Guggenheim, where some of our Gaitondes have gone to the retrospective they had on the artist, both at New York and in Venice at the Peggy Guggenheim. Well, collaboration with artists also is quite important for us because it gives us a chance to stay abreast of the contemporary art scene, because we do have a modern collection that stops when the collector died. So this is a way of linking in with what's happening there, and Jitish is part of our collection as well. And so we did this installation is called Covering Letter. We felt it was a strong work, and it really is a piece of historical correspondence that is beamed onto a screen of traversable fog. And it's a letter written by Gandhi in 1939 to Hitler, asking him to reconsider his violent means. And Jitish also saw this as a kind of haiku, this letter, where it gives us an opportunity for self-reflection, especially in the modern context where we're living with a lot of violence. This is the exhibition that's on two paintings, sort of reflected the journey that the artist had gone through over the years, the twists and turns and the paths they had explored. So that was the journey, is the destination. It's just come down now. Well, we've also done retrospectives of the major artists in our collection. That was Kumar, when we discovered that we had such a splendid collection of 20 or more works in the Nicholson collection. And it covered the whole range, right from the figurative period that Ramkura had from 1958 right up to 1999, just before Nicholson died. And this is the next show we're going to open with this later this month, Laxman Shreshtha, The Infinite Project. Well, Laxman and Nicholson shared a very close relationship. They were great friends, and the friendship, of course, had its ups and downs. But Laxman always had, I think, most favored status with Nicholson. We have 49 works in the collection, and really I think it represents one of the best, if not the best, of Laxman's oeuvre. Well, exhibitions is one part of what we do. We also have a whole series of events that are constructed around the exhibition so that it keeps people coming back to the gallery. It also gives, it's a kind of, we want it to be a forum for interaction between artists and the artist community. And we really want to be a part of the extended space of the city. So a forum for discussion on all subjects related to art. So around our first exhibition, we had the series of walkabouts with the Bombay artists, so that's Atul, you can see there, and we also had it with Sudhir Patwardhan and Geev Patel. And this worked so well because here you actually had artists talking about their work, talking about other people's work. You could directly interact with them, you got an insight into their thought processes. So I think that really clicked with people. Around the women's exhibition, we had a series of conversations. That's Anju Dodia and Reena Kallat in conversation with Nancy Adijania, and I remember reading a line by Anju. She said, "Why I'm not a woman artist?" And I used that as a starting point for the discussion, where we talked about whether it was valid to talk about art in terms of gender. And so we extended these conversations into extended areas like photography, architecture. That's Brinda Somaya there. And then we did a lecture series around Nothing is Absolute with, you can see Ashok Vajpayee there talking about Swaminathan and Raza, where Rashmi Podar talked about Tantra, which has been a huge source of inspiration for so many artists, abstract artists. And Ranjit talked about the visual estrangement that abstract art can bring about. And we also try to do seminars, symposiums like the Piramal Foundation does here, because there is so little institutional support for modern art. So it's organizations like us that need to step in and fill the gap. Around the MOHAN SAMANT exhibition, we had a series of performances, because Samant himself was an artist who played the sarangi with almost as much passion as he painted. And so here we've created, we had a musical evening which recreated the little musical soirees he used to have in his loft apartment in New York. Then we had poetry and the visual arts, and we had Asta Debu here dancing. He did a whole series of pieces that were inspired by Mohan Samant's art. So back to the question of our audiences, and what we're constantly talking about is who are we doing this for? Because the museum has this huge footfall of over 2,000 visitors a day. But the point is, are we connecting to these people? Because traditionally, the kind of people who come to modern art galleries are upper middle class, English speaking, educated. And conversely, artists are from just any background, from different religious, ethnic, economic backgrounds. And so too, I presume, are the people who are interested in art. So it's really important to have them walking into your gallery. And that's why our motto is kind of think global, act local. So we try to give people the best in terms of quality, but also make sure that the exhibitions that we do have connect with them. Being inclusive. In my discussions with the director, he always asks me, so are your exhibitions only for the informed? So the idea being, what is my role as a curator if I'm only going to preach to the converted? So we really try to look at how the subjects we pick, we can connect, even down to basics like being bilingual. All the signage, all the labels are in 2 languages. And then we have this little reading corner where we provide a lot of material about the exhibition. We try to have translations of all the essays that we have, the catalogs, just to see that people at least have that chance to connect. And in one of the seminars that we had, we did the first session in Marathi. And it was an eye-opener because there was a literal stampede to get in. And it just gave us an idea of the hunger for this kind of programming and this considerable Marathi-speaking population that was just waiting to be engaged with. So 2 programs later, I decided we were calling Atul Dodia again to the gallery, and I said, let's do it in Atul, will you do it in Marathi? And he said, okay, let me try, and whatnot. And he did. But I had such a pushback from so many people who kept ringing me up and saying, but why? We want to listen to Atul. Why are you doing it in Marathi? It's not fair. So I said, now let's share. And the next time he'll do it in English. Education is a huge focus for us and the museum as well, because we think it's important to get children when they're young so that they develop an interest in the museum, they're familiar with the museum, that art becomes an integral part of the curriculum of schools. And also that my ideal would be where going to the museum is like going to the movies for children. We also want the Nicholson to develop into a knowledge center, the go-to place for information or research or archives on all material on modern Indian art. And we're trying to have residencies both for artists and for research scholars. And finally, we want this to be a cultural space where everyone comes for the enjoyment of art, a knowledge center, for research and culture, but also a forum where the artists can interact with people who are interested in art. And we want to be an organization that explores and stimulates different cultural and art practices. So that's it, and thank you very much.